The Velthiri Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the last 100 years. No species had ever stopped them. Their warships were massive and deadly, covered in dark metal that absorbed light like a hungry shadow. Their weapons could burn entire cities in seconds. Their soldiers were tall, strong, trained to kill without mercy. High Commander Zorith stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was old by Velthiri standards, with gray scales covering his face and scars from countless battles marking his body. He had personally led the conquest of 6 worlds. He had watched civilizations crumble before his feet. He had never known defeat. Now he looked at the small blue planet floating in the darkness of space. His scouts had found it 3 months ago, tucked away in an unremarkable corner of an unremarkable galaxy. The natives called it Earth. Zorith had studied these creatures called humans. They were soft, weak things made of flesh and bone. They had no natural weapons, no claws or fangs or armor. They spent their time fighting among themselves over pieces of land and imaginary lines on maps. They had barely managed to reach their own moon, and their deep space exploration was limited to tiny machines that moved slower than a Velthiri child could run. A primitive species, Zorith said to his officers gathered around him. They pose no threat to us. We will add their world to our holdings and use them as labor for our mining operations. His second-in-command, a younger Velthiri named Kethos, pulled up data on the main screen. High Commander, they do possess nuclear weapons. Crude devices, but capable of significant destruction. Zorith made a dismissive sound. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. A single destroyer could reduce their entire military to ash in hours. Send the standard ultimatum. The message was transmitted to every communication device on Earth. It was simple and direct. Surrender unconditionally within 24 hours or face complete annihilation. The Velthiri had sent this same message to dozens of worlds. Every single one had surrendered. Zoroth expected the humans to do the same. He expected panic, chaos, begging for mercy. He expected their leaders to fall over themselves trying to negotiate terms. What he got instead was a response that confused. A human female, appeared on his view screen. She was small, with dark skin and gray hair pulled back from her face. She wore simple clothing and stood behind a wooden podium with a strange symbol on it. She introduced herself as Secretary General Linda Morrison of something called the United Nations. Her voice was calm, pleasant even, as if she were discussing the weather rather than the end of her species. "We have received your transmission," she said. "The people of Earth have discussed your terms. We respectfully decline." Zoroth's officers exchanged confused looks. "No species had ever declined before," Linda Morrison continued. "Furthermore, we would like to inform you that any hostile action against Earth or its people will be considered an act of war. We strongly advise you to leave our solar system immediately." For a moment, Zoroth simply stared at the screen. Then he laughed. It was a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the bridge. "You misunderstand your situation, human," he said. "You have no fleet. No planetary defenses worth mentioning. Your weapons are toys compared to ours. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification of your conquest." Linda Morrison did not look afraid. She did not look worried. Instead, she smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Zoroth's laughter die in his throat. "Hi, Commander," she said. "You have clearly done your research on our capabilities. But I wonder if you researched our history." She touched something on her podium, and images appeared beside her. Images of human wars, massive battles with millions of soldiers, explosions that turned cities to dust, weapons that poisoned the land for generations. "We are not a peaceful species," Linda Morrison said. "We have spent our entire existence fighting. We have killed each other over religion, over land, over resources, over ideas. We have waged war with such ferocity that we nearly destroyed our own planet multiple times. We have built weapons capable of ending all life on Earth. And we have pointed those weapons at each other." She paused, letting her words sink in. "That was when we were fighting people we considered brothers and sisters. People we loved. People who shared our world. She leaned forward, and her voice grew cold. You are not people we love. You are invaders. You are threatening our home, our families, our children. And I promise you, High Commander, if you think we were vicious when fighting each other, you have no idea what we will do to defend ourselves against you. Zoroth felt something stir in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it because he had not felt it in so long. Doubt, but he pushed it aside. These were empty words from a desperate creature. Humans were soft, weak. They would break like all the others. You have made your choice, he said. You will regret it. No, Linda Morrison replied. You will. The transmission ended. Zorath turned to his officers. Some of them looked uncertain now, disturbed by the human's words. He could not allow that doubt to spread. Begin the invasion, he ordered. Destroy their military installations first, then their population centers. We will make an example of this world. The Velthari fleet began to move. 50 warships descended toward Earth, their weapons charging with deadly energy. They expected the humans to scatter and run. They expected fear and chaos. What they found instead surprised them. Within hours of the ultimatum expiring, something strange happened on Earth. Countries that had been enemies for centuries suddenly stopped fighting. Leaders who had refused to speak to each other for decades picked up their phones. Resources that had been hoarded were freely shared. Every single nation on the planet, without exception, joined together against the common threat. Humans had a saying that Zorath did not know yet, but would soon learn. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And on that day, every human on Earth decided that they had only one enemy. The Velthari had expected to conquer a divided, primitive world instead. They had awakened something far more dangerous. They had given humanity a reason to unite, and they had given humanity a reason to fight. High Commander. Zorath watched his fleet descend toward Earth. Confident in his victory, he did not know that in the bunkers and military bases below, humans were preparing a welcome that would shake the foundations of his empire. He did not know that he had just made the worst mistake of his long and bloody career. He had declared war on the deadliest species in the galaxy, and they were ready to show him why. The Velthari fleet entered Earth's atmosphere expecting an easy victory. Their sensors showed primitive military bases, outdated weapons, and a population of soft creatures who had never faced a real threat from beyond their world. High Commander Zoroth ordered his ships to target the largest military installations first. He wanted to crush human resistance quickly and completely. He did not expect what happened next. General Samuel Ortega stood in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps. He was 62 years old. With gray hair cut short and hands scarred from decades of military service, he had fought in 3 wars before this one, and he had seen terrible things. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of alien warships descending on his planet around him. Officers from every major nation worked side by side. American generals sat next to Russian commanders. Chinese admirals shared screens with European strategists. Old enemies had become instant allies. Status report, Samuel said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Colonel Patricia Hawkins. A tall woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude pulled up the global display. Sir, we have full cooperation from every nuclear power. All arsenals are now under unified command. Submarine fleets are in position across the Atlantic and Pacific. Ground-based launchers in North America, Russia, and China are armed and ready. And the special projects? Patricia allowed herself a small smile. Dr. Kevin Park at the Nevada facility confirms the prototype is operational. They are calling it Project Prometheus. It is an energy weapon we have been developing in secret for 15 years. Nobody thought we would ever actually need it, Samuel nodded. He remembered the arguments in Congress about funding secret weapons programs. He remembered politicians saying it was a waste of money. That no threat would ever require such extreme measures. He wished those politicians could see. The alien warships now filling the sky. What about civilian evacuations? He asked, proceeding in all major cities. People are scared, sir, but they are not panicking. The president's address helped calm things down. So did the footage from Proxima. Samuel's jaw tightened at the mention of Proxima. The Velthri had made a mistake 3 days ago. They had attacked the small human research station on Proxima Centauri b, the first human colony outside the solar system. 47 scientists and their families had been living there, studying the alien world and dreaming of humanity's future among the stars. The Velthri had burned them all alive. They had broadcast the destruction across every frequency, intending it as a warning of what would happen to Earth if humans did not surrender. It had not worked as they intended. Humans did not see it as a warning. They saw it as a murder. They saw the faces of the dead scientists, the children who had been playing in the colony's gardens, the families who had traveled so far to build something new, and they became angry. Not scared, not desperate, angry. On every continent, recruitment stations were overwhelmed with volunteers. Factories that made cars and electronics were converted to produce weapons overnight. Scientists abandoned their research to work on military applications. Everyone, from teenagers to grandparents, wanted to fight. The Velthri had expected to break human will with their show of force instead. They had unified it. The first wave of Velthri ships descended on North America. Their targets were military bases in Colorado, Nevada, and Texas. Their shields were raised, their weapons charged. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known prey that could fight back. Then the missiles came. Nuclear warheads streaked upward from submarines hidden in the Pacific. More launched from silos in Montana and Wyoming. Russian missiles joined them from Siberia. Chinese missiles from the Gobi Desert. Every nuclear power on Earth fired everything they had at the descending fleet. The sky turned white with fire. The Velthri. The shields held against most of the explosions. Their technology was advanced, designed to withstand the weapons of dozens of conquered species. But the sheer number of missiles was staggering. For every warhead that detonated harmlessly against their barriers, 3 more followed. The impacts were constant, relentless, overwhelming. High Commander Zoroth watched from orbit, his confidence beginning to crack. How many weapons do these creatures have? He demanded. Kethos checked the data, his face pale. High Commander, they appear to have built enough nuclear devices to destroy their own planet several times over. Why would any species do that? They built them to use against each other, sir. They pointed these weapons at their own kind. Zoroth stared at the screen, showing the endless barrage of missiles. What kind of insane species built weapons to destroy itself? Then something new entered the fight. In the Nevada desert, Dr. Kevin Parks stood at the controls of Project Prometheus. He was a small man with glasses and messy hair, the kind of person who looked more comfortable in a laboratory than a combat zone. But his hands were steady as he activated the weapon. 3 fusion reactors hummed to life. Energy built in the massive focusing array. And then a beam of pure, concentrated power lanced upward into the sky. It struck the lead Velthri destroyer, ship called the Righteous Fury, directly in the center of its hull. For a moment, nothing happened. The Velthri shields flickered and pulsed, trying to absorb the incredible amount of energy being poured into them. Then, with a sound like thunder that could be heard across 3 states, the shields failed. The Righteous Fury broke apart in the sky. Pieces of alien metal, some the size of houses, rained down into the Pacific Ocean. The ship that was supposed to be invincible, the ship that had destroyed 6 worlds, fell in flames. A cheer went up in bunkers and command centers around the world. Humans had drawn first blood. But Zoroth was not ready to retreat. He ordered his remaining ships to concentrate fire on the source of that beam. Waves of energy weapons struck the Nevada facility, and within minutes was nothing but a smoking crater. Dr. Kevin Park died in the attack, along with 300 others. But his weapon had done its job. It had proven that the Velthri could be killed in the hours that followed. The battle became chaos. Velthri ships swept across the planet, burning cities and military bases. Millions of humans died in the first day alone. But for every target the aliens destroyed, humans rebuilt somewhere else. For every weapon they eliminated, humans built 2 more. The Velthri landed ground troops in what they thought were secured zones. They expected surrender. They expected fear. Instead, they found themselves fighting for every inch of ground. Soldiers attacked them with guns and rockets. Civilians attacked them with knives and homemade bombs. Even children threw rocks and bottles. The humans refused to stop. They refused to give up. They refused to acknowledge that they were supposed to be defeated. Kethos brought Zorath a report at the end of the first week. The young officer's voice was quiet, troubled. "Hi, Commander. Our casualties are climbing. We have lost 2 more ships and 6,000 soldiers. Our supply lines are stretched thin, and the humans show no signs of surrendering." Zorath stared at the planet below. Fires burned across its surface. Millions were dead. Any rational species would have given up by now, but humans were not rational. They were something else entirely, something dangerous. "Continue the attack," Zorath ordered, but for the first time, his voice held a note of uncertainty. They cannot resist forever. But deep in his heart, he was beginning to wonder if he was wrong. 6 months had passed since the invasion began, and the Velthri Empire faced something they had never encountered before. They controlled Earth's orbit completely. Their ships circled the planet like hungry predators, destroying any target they could identify. They had burned cities, killed millions, and reduced entire regions to wasteland, but they could not hold the ground. Every time Velthri troops landed on Earth's surface, humans swarmed them from every direction. Not just soldiers with military weapons, but ordinary people with whatever they could find. Farmers attacked with hunting rifles and shotguns. Teachers built bombs from cleaning supplies and kitchen chemicals. Factory workers welded armor onto trucks and charged at alien positions. Even elderly grandmothers organized networks to smuggle food and ammunition to resistance fighters. The Velthri had expected an organized military to defeat. What they found instead was an entire species that refused to accept defeat. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, saw themselves as a soldier in this war. General Patricia Hawkins had taken command after. Samuel Ortega died defending the Geneva bunker. She was operating now from a secret facility hidden deep in the Rocky Mountains, constantly moving to avoid detection. Her left arm was wrapped in bandages from a close call with a Velthri patrol last week. She had not slept properly in months, but her eyes were sharp and her voice was steady as she addressed her command staff. "They are making the same mistake every invader makes," she said, pointing at the holographic map showing Velthri positions. "They are trying to control territory. They do not understand that we are not fighting for territory. We are fighting because we refuse to lose." Captain Matthew Cole, a young officer who had been a high school teacher before the war, nodded in agreement. "Our resistance cells report that Velthri patrols are avoiding populated areas now. They take too many casualties when they enter towns and cities." "Good. Keep the pressure on. Make them afraid to walk on our soil." In another part of the bunker, a captured Velthri shuttle sat in a makeshift laboratory. It had been taken 3 months ago when its pilot made the fatal mistake of landing near a small farming community in Kansas. The pilot had expected the humans there to flee or surrender. Instead, 200 farmers had surrounded the shuttle within minutes. The pilot had not survived the encounter, but the shuttle was mostly intact. Dr. Lisa Grant led the team studying the alien technology. She was young, barely 30, with dark circles under her eyes from too many sleepless nights. Before the war, she had been working on her doctorate in physics. Now she was humanity's leading expert on Velthri technology. "The key to their power is right here," she explained to Patricia during a video call. "They use a form of contained antimatter as their energy source. We cannot replicate it yet. Our technology is decades away from that. But we can disrupt it." "Explain," Patricia said. Lisa pulled up a diagram on her tablet. "Their antimatter containment uses a specific frequency of magnetic field. If we can get close enough to their ships with a device that generates an opposing frequency, we can cause a cascade failure in their reactor. The antimatter escapes containment, and the entire ship destroys itself." Patricia studied the diagram. "How close is close enough?" "About 2 kilometers. That is a suicide mission." Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I have already received 500 volunteer applications. I had to stop accepting them because there were too many. This was what the Velthari could not understand. Humans were not fighting to survive. They had already accepted that they might not survive. They were fighting because they refused to be conquered. They were fighting because surrender was worse than death. They were fighting out of pure, stubborn spite. High Commander Zorath received reports every day that made no sense to him. Human soldiers charging fortified Velthari positions with no hope of victory, taking as many aliens as they could with them before they fell. Civilian populations refusing to evacuate from war zones, instead building barricades and preparing to fight to the last person. Captured humans dying before revealing any useful information, sometimes by their own hand. He called a meeting of his senior officers to discuss the situation. "We have been fighting this species for 6 months," he said. "We have killed tens of millions of them. We have destroyed their largest cities, their industrial centers, their military bases. And yet they fight harder now than they did on the first day. Explain this to me." Kethos, who had become something of an expert on human behavior through necessity, spoke carefully. "High Commander, I believe I understand now. We made a fundamental error in our assessment of this species." "What error?" "We assumed they were like other civilizations we have conquered. Those species fought to protect their lives, their property, their comfort. When we threatened those things, they surrendered to preserve what they could." Kethos paused, gathering his thoughts. "Humans are different. They do not value their lives above all else. They value something else more. They call it pride, honor, freedom. They would rather die than live as slaves. They would rather see their world burn than hand it over to us." Zorath stared at his officer. "That is irrational, as High Commander, but it is also terrifying." The war continued, and humanity adapted with frightening speed. Within weeks of capturing the first Velthari technology, they had begun producing their own versions. The weapons were crude and ugly, held together with welds and duct tape, but they worked. Human engineers learned by doing, by failing, by dying and trying again. Underground factories produced new weapons daily. Scientists who had spent their lives studying abstract theories now focused every bit of their genius on destroying the enemy. Artists and writers created propaganda that kept human spirits high. Musicians composed songs that soldiers sang as they marched into battle. The Velthari had more ships, more soldiers, more technology, but they were fighting for conquest, for resources. For the glory of their empire, humans were fighting for everything they loved. And as the months passed, even the most confident Velthari officers began to wonder if they could win this war. They could kill humans by the millions, but there were always more. They could destroy cities, but humans rebuilt in caves and tunnels. They could bomb factories, but humans built new ones in hidden locations. General Patricia Hawkins received a report that made her smile for the first time in weeks. Human scientists had successfully tested a faster-than-light engine built from captured Velthari technology. It was rough and unstable, but it worked. Humanity was no longer trapped on Earth. The hunters were about to become the hunted, and somewhere in orbit, High Commander Zorath felt a chill run down his spine without knowing why. His empire had conquered 17 star systems, but they had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that would not stop, an enemy that could not be broken, an enemy that was learning to fight back. 1 year after the invasion began, humanity launched Operation Vengeance. For 12 months, humans had been fighting a defensive war. They had defended their cities, their bunkers, their families. They had made the Velthari pay for every inch of ground and blood. But they had always been reacting, always waiting for the next attack. Now, for the first time, they were going to strike back, using technology salvaged from crashed Velthari ships, and combined with their own desperate innovation, human engineers had constructed 12 vessels capable of traveling faster than light. These ships were not beautiful or elegant like Velthari craft. They were ugly, brutal things made of welded metal plates and exposed wiring. They looked like they had been built in a junkyard, because many of them had been. But they worked. And that was all that mattered. Captain Daniel Reyes stood on the bridge of the lead ship. His crew had named it the Spite because that was exactly what this mission was about. Pure, stubborn spite against the enemy that had tried to destroy them. Daniel was 29 years old. Before the war, he had been a commercial pilot flying cargo routes across the Pacific Ocean. He had spent his days moving boxes of electronics and clothing from one city to another, living a quiet life with his wife and young daughter. His wife and daughter had died in the bombing of San Francisco 3 months ago. He had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. "All ships report ready," said Lieutenant Maria Santos, his first officer. She was young, barely 25, with short dark hair and steady hands. She had been an engineering student before the war. Now she was one of the best officers in humanity's new fleet. Daniel looked at the faces of his crew. There were 47 people on the Spite and similar numbers on each of the other 11 ships. They were engineers and scientists, teachers and farmers, doctors and mechanics. Most of them had never been in combat before the invasion. Now, they were about to lead humanity's first strike against another star system. None of them expected to come back alive. "You all know the mission," Daniel said, his voice calm and clear. "We are going to hit the Velthari supply depot at their home world, Velthari's Prime. We are going to destroy everything we can reach, and we are going to show them that distance does not protect them from us." He paused, looking at each face in turn. "They came to our home. They burned our cities. They killed our families. Now we are going to follow them home and return the favor." A cheer went up through the ship. It was not a happy sound. It was angry, fierce, determined. "Jump in 60 seconds, Maria announced. Daniel sat in the captain's chair and gripped the armrests. The jump technology was still experimental. There was a real chance their ships would simply disappear into nothing and never be seen again. But that risk was acceptable. Everything was acceptable if it meant hurting the enemy. The countdown reached 0, and the fleet jumped. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no light, no sensation at all. It was as if the universe itself had stopped existing. Then reality returned in a flash of blinding light, and the human fleet emerged in the Velthari home system. Veltharis Prime was a large red planet orbiting a dying orange star. Around it floated dozens of space stations, shipyards, and orbital platforms. This was the heart of the Velthari Empire, the center of their power. No enemy had ever attacked this place. No enemy had ever come close, until now. The Velthari detected the human ships immediately, but they were slow to respond. Their commanders could not believe what their sensors were telling them. Humans here? In their home system? It was impossible. The primitives did not have jump technology. They were trapped on their dying world, waiting to be conquered. By the time the Velthari organized a response, it was too late. The human fleet scattered and attacked from every direction. They fired everything they had at the orbital stations and shipyards. Their weapons were crude compared to Velthari technology, but there were so many of them, and the humans fired without stopping, without pausing to aim properly, without caring about ammunition conservation. They were not trying to win. They were trying to hurt the supply depot on the third moon of Veltharis. Prime exploded in a massive fireball that could be seen from the planet's surface. 3 orbital stations fell, their hulls breached, and their crews dying in the vacuum of space. A shipyard that was building the Empire's next generation of warships was reduced to spinning debris. Velthari. Defense ships scrambled to intercept the attackers, but the human vessels were fast and unpredictable. They zigged and zagged in patterns that made no tactical sense. They flew straight at superior enemy forces and opened fire at point-blank range. They rammed damaged Velthari ships when their weapons ran out. For human ships were destroyed in the first hour of the battle. Then 2 more. Then 3 more. But the surviving vessels kept fighting, kept destroying, kept hurting the enemy when only 5 human ships remained, and the Velthari Defense Force was finally closing in to finish them off. Captain Daniel Reyes gave his last order. "All ships, prepare to jump. We have done what we came to do." The surviving fleet jumped out of the system, leaving chaos behind them. The Velthari stared at the destruction in disbelief. Their supply depot was gone. Their shipyards were burning. Thousands of their people were dead, and the humans had left a message before jumping away. Daniel Reyes had broadcast a transmission on every Velthari frequency. His face appeared on screens across the Empire, illuminated by the glow of burning Velthari infrastructure behind him. "This is humanity," he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "We did not ask for this war. We did not want it. But you brought it to our home. You killed our families, our children. You burned our world and called it conquest." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was cold as ice. "Now you know what that feels like. This is not the end. This is the beginning. We are coming for you. Not today. Not tomorrow. But we are coming. Every world you hold, every station you build, every ship you launch will be a target. We will hunt you across every star in this galaxy until there is nothing left of your empire but dust and memory." Daniel leaned forward, and his eyes burned with hatred. "You wanted to know what makes humans dangerous? It is not our weapons. It is not our technology. It is that we would rather die fighting than live on our knees. You made us your enemies. Now you will learn what that means." The transmission ended. High Commander Zoreth watched the recording in his quarters aboard the Eternal Dominion. He watched it once, twice, 17 times. He could not look away from the humans' eyes. There was no fear in them, no desperation. Only a cold, patient hatred that promised eternal war. For the first time in the history of the Velthari Empire, an enemy had struck their home system. For the first time, the conquerors understood what it felt like to be conquered, and across the galaxy, other species watched. Species that had been enslaved by the Velthari. Species that had surrendered without a fight. Species that had given up hope long ago. Now they saw something new. They saw that the mighty Velthari could be hurt. They saw that resistance was possible, and they began to remember what hope felt like. The tide of the war had turned, and nothing would ever be the same again. 2 years after the war began, a Velthari diplomatic vessel entered Earth's solar system under a white flag of truce. The ship moved slowly, carefully, making no aggressive moves. It broadcast peaceful messages on every frequency, requesting permission to approach. This was something no Velthari vessel had ever done before. The mighty Empire did not ask permission from lesser species. They took what they wanted, but everything had changed. Earth below was scarred and wounded. 3 billion humans had died in the 2 years of fighting. Cities that had stood for centuries were now ruins. Forests had burned. Rivers ran black with ash. The beautiful blue planet that the Velthari had first observed was now marked with the scars of war. But humans still lived, and they were no longer alone. Word of humanity's resistance had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had cowered before the Velthari for generations suddenly found their courage. The Cathori, a race of beings who had been enslaved for 100 years, rose up against their masters. The Vorn Collective, who had stayed neutral during every Velthari conquest, began secretly supplying human forces with weapons and technology. Even the Malaxi, a species so peaceful they had never built a weapon in their history, started sending food and medical supplies to Earth. Humanity had done what no other species could. They had shown the galaxy that the Velthari could be beaten. General Patricia Hawkins met the Velthari delegation in the rebuilt ruins of Geneva. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray and her face lined with exhaustion. Her left arm had been replaced with a metal prosthetic after. A Velthari bombardment had destroyed the bunker she was commanding. She walked with a slight limp from another injury that had never fully healed, but her eyes were sharp as ever. Her voice did not shake. Across from her sat High Commander Zoreth. He looked different from the proud conqueror who had appeared on their screens 2 years ago. He seemed smaller somehow, diminished. His scales had lost their luster. His eyes showed something Patricia had never expected to see in them: defeat. "You requested this meeting," Patricia said. It was not a question. "Speak." Zoreth took a moment to gather himself. It was not easy for him to say what he had come to say. He had never spoken these words before in his long career. The Velthari Empire is prepared to offer a ceasefire, he said. We will withdraw all forces from your solar system. We will release every human prisoner we hold. We will provide resources to help rebuild what we have destroyed. Patricia waited, knowing there was more. In return, Zorath continued, you will end your alliances with the rebel species attacking our holdings. You will cease your raids on our supply lines. You will allow the Empire to maintain its current borders. The human officers around Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Some of them thought this might be a good deal. The war had cost so much. So many dead. So much destruction. A chance to stop the killing. To rebuild. To breathe. But Patricia understood something they did not. She leaned forward, and her voice was cold. You invaded our world. You burned our cities. You killed 3 billion of our people. Children, elderly, families, who had done nothing to you. And now you come asking us for mercy. Zorath's jaw tightened. We are offering peace, Patricia said. You are offering surrender. You just lack the courage to call it what it is. She stood up from her chair. Around her, human officers straightened their backs, their eyes hard. Here are our terms, Patricia said. You will withdraw from every star system you have conquered in the last 200 years. Every single one. You will free every species you have enslaved. The Cathor, the Sundari, the Hollow, all of them. You will dismantle 90% of your war fleet. And you will stand trial before a galactic court for your crimes against sentient life. Zorath stared at her in disbelief. Those terms are impossible. The Empire would never accept them. Our people would revolt. Our government would fall. Patricia smiled. It was the same smile Linda Morrison had worn 2 years ago on the day this all began. Then your empire will fall. Because we will not stop. We have built a fleet now, Zorath. Real ships. Not the desperate garbage we use to attack your home system. Our allies are providing us with technology you cannot imagine. And every day, more species join our cause. She leaned down, bringing her face close to his. You wanted to know what makes humans dangerous? It is not our weapons. It is not our stubbornness. It is that we have no limit. No line we will not cross. No price too high to pay for victory. You hurt us, so we will hurt you. You take from us, we will take everything from you. You pushed us to the edge of extinction, and instead of dying quietly, we became something terrible. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We would rather burn this entire galaxy to ash than kneel to those who wronged us. That is what you created when you attacked Earth. That is the monster you awakened. And now, you have to live with the consequences. The room was silent. Outside, through windows that looked out on the ruins of Geneva, smoke still rose from buildings destroyed 2 years ago. Zorath looked at the humans standing over him. He remembered the transmission he had received at the start of this war. He remembered dismissing humans as primitive, weak, insignificant. He had been wrong. So terribly, terribly wrong. We need time to consult with our government, he said quietly. Patricia nodded. You have 1 week. After that, we resume operations. The Velthari delegation left. Zorath returned to his ship and sent a message to the Imperial Council explaining the situation. He recommended accepting the human terms 3 days later. The Empire responded. They accepted everything. The war was over. 10 years later, the galaxy was a different place. The Velthari Empire still existed, but it was a shadow of its former power. Its conquered systems had become independent. Its enslaved species had formed their own nations. Its war fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its former size, and at the center of the new, galactic order sat humanity. They had not become conquerors. They had no desire to rule over others. They remembered too well what it felt like to be under someone else's boot. But they were watchful, and they were remembered in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss trade, to resolve disputes, to build something better than what had come before. Humans sat among them, no longer primitives to be conquered, but equals to be respected. On the wall of the council chamber hung a simple plaque. It was written in 100 languages, so that every species could read it. It said, "Here stood Earth, here stood humanity. Here stood those who would not yield." And beneath it, in smaller letters, a warning: "Let all who would threaten the innocent remember what happened to those who tried." The galaxy was not peaceful. It would never be peaceful. Too many species, too many ambitions, too many old wounds. But it was free, and it was protected by a species that had learned the hardest lesson in the universe. Sometimes, to protect what you love, you have to become something frightening. Humanity had paid that price. They had become the thing that monsters feared, and they would never forget what it cost them. General Patricia Hawkins lived to see the peace she had fought for. She retired to a small house overlooking the ocean, where the waves washed against shores that had once been black with ash. She died quietly in her sleep at the age of 87, surrounded by her grandchildren. The galaxy mourned her passing. Even some Velthari sent messages of respect, and on her grave they carved simple words that said everything that needed to be said. She refused to surrender. That was the lesson humanity taught the universe. That was the legacy of the war. Never threaten those who have nothing left to lose, because they will make you pay for it in ways you cannot imagine. The end.